Hey friendo, Steve here. I figured I'd give you guys a little office tour, a behind-the-scenes look at what we do here at Going In Raw. Of course, behind me is Larson over there. He's on the phone right now with Vince McMahon. A lot of you guys don't know this, but a couple months ago, the WWE reached out to us and asked Going In Raw for some ideas on how to maybe freshen up Raw and SmackDown. They haven't actually used any of our ideas, except for the 24/7 title. But all that's really happened is we get these monthly 4-hour phone calls from Vince. Usually they're at 2 o'clock in the morning. Larson's on the phone with him right now. Let's go listen in.
And for WrestleMania, the 4 horsewomen have a fatal 4-way wedding. No wrestling. They all get married to each other with the title on the line. Live sex show. Interrupted by Brock Lesnar. But he's now a cuck. Yeah, it's such good shit.
Where's the wrestling, Vince?
Hey friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
Being a wrestler can't be easy in the life of a WWE superstar for a variety of reasons. Probably isn't for everyone.
So we thought of 10 names that probably should have thought twice before finding themselves under the employ of Vince McMahon.
Here are the top 10 wrestlers who never should have joined WWE.
Number 10.
Jon Moxley. All right, so it's hard to argue that Mox wouldn't be where he is today if he hadn't been in WWE first. I mean, he went from CZW deathmatch guy to multi-millionaire Grand Slam champion within the span of what, like a few short years?
Yeah, something like that. But given just how hard he shot in Vince McMahon and the stifling creative process of WWE on the Talk Is Jericho podcast upon his AEW debut, you gotta ask yourself, what the hell was he doing there in the first place?
Yeah, it's obvious nothing about WWE's creative structure was conducive to unleashing the full potential of the Mox Ambrose shtick. And that became obvious during his time on the main roster. The man got himself massively over with the crowd despite Vince's complete and total obliviousness to what the character actually was.
Among some of the more egregious examples of misfires on the Ambrose character included a line they wanted Dean to use in a promo during a heel turn about Roman's leukemia scare that was so offensive, Mox wouldn't even tell Jericho what it was on the podcast.
Yeah, and while it's doubtful a path without WWE would have led him to the success he's attained professionally, nor would he have met his lovely wife, Renee Young, Mox seems like the kind of guy who'd rather be happy and poor than rich and have to deal with a crazy old man feeding him lousy ideas under the pretense that they are in fact
Such good shit.
not such good shit, bitch.
It's who you are.
Number 9.
Kerry Von Erich! The Von Erichs were major celebrities down in their home promotion WCCW back in the 80s. Kerry Von Erich clearly was the alpha of the group. He had rock star looks, a natural charisma, and small town charm.
Unfortunately, by the time he reached the WWF in 1990, he had gone through more than his fair share of tragedy. For one thing, a motorcycle accident in 1986 resulted in an amputated foot. You wouldn't know it by watching him wrestle though, as he wore a prosthetic during his subsequent matches and didn't miss a beat.
Yeah, his brothers, David and Mike, both died tragically in the years prior to him arriving in WWF, and Kerry himself had developed an addiction to painkillers. And 1 year after arriving, his brother Chris committed suicide. And then towards the end of his run in WWF, he went through a rough divorce from his wife of 9 years.
Although he won the Intercontinental Championship during his time in WWF, it seems as though the Texas Tornado's personal issues were just too much for the guy, and you can't help but think that maybe the WWE lifestyle just made things worse.
Yeah. Be honest with you, it kind of feels like we shouldn't end this entry with a joke, man.
I mean, yeah, you wouldn't want to stick your foot in your mouth.
Oh God, was that a joke about his foot?
No, I didn't mean it like that. No,
Totally made a joke about his foot.
Gosh, I didn't mean it like that.
Number 8.
Goldberg! Much has been said about the botched WCW invasion angle. The biggest issue most fans had with it had to do with the lack of big names WWE were able to bring over for the story due to those huge Turner contracts.
Arguably the biggest name WWE could have wanted for the angle would have been Goldberg, the hottest homegrown star under the WCW banner. Dream matches with Stone Cold, The Rock, Triple H, Undertaker would have been huge business. hot off the heels of Vince buying the former Ted Turner-owned promotion.
But the entire angle had fizzled out almost 2 years before Goldberg eventually arrived in WWE in 2003, and although he was immediately pushed to the top with feuds against Rock, Triple H, Chris Jericho, and of course Brock Lesnar, his first run in WWE was just lacking something.
You got that right. Goldberg has said that by the time his contract had run up in 2004, he just wasn't having fun in WWE and didn't want to work the number of dates Vince wanted him to. He also recently said that his biggest regret was never having worked a match against Stone Cold Steve Austin, who had wrestled his retirement match one night before Goldberg arrived on Raw. It's not like Goldberg's first run was bad, it just wasn't nearly the dream match scenario many thought it could have been.
Yeah, obviously his second run a few years back was a lot more successful as all parties seemed to be on the same page. As for his match against Undertaker in Saudi Arabia, ooh, man, are we gonna do a list of the top 10 train wrecks in wrestling anytime soon, Larson?
How about top 10 reasons not to concuss yourself against the door before your match begins?
Number 7.
Lex Luger! It is possible there was no wrestler on the planet that was a better fit for WCW. Now, obviously, other wrestlers had more success than WCW. Sting and Ric Flair come to mind. But come on, those two were iconic. They would have had success regardless of where they were, and they did.
Yeah, but what we mean is that Lex just had the WCW it factor. The mullet, the leathery bodybuilder physique, the mid-80s Sears catalog model face. The charisma?
Oh, the charisma. If you absolutely, positively had to have a guy who, when he talked, reminded you of a guy that works at AutoZone that won't shut up about his high school quarterback glory days when all you want to do is find the right replacement headlight bulb, Lex Luger was your guy.
Yeah, and sure, his time in WWF between stints in WCW was memorable, but in largely bad ways. Remember, he was the guy, like 4th or 5th in line, that Vince wanted to groom to be the new Hogan after Warrior, Sid, at least 2, 3, 20 more. But Vince never quite had the faith that led him to pull the trigger on a world title run.
The closest Lex came to the top was a win over WWF champion Yokozuna at SummerSlam 93 via countout. And then like 3 dudes from the locker room came out and celebrated by hoisting Lex on their shoulders. Balloons came down and Lex started waving the American flag and not the WWF title over his head because guess what? Countout victories mean fuck all.
And despite Vince screaming on commentary his prediction that Lex, he's become WWE champion in a rematch, that never happened. Nope. Instead, Luger took the Lex Express to WCW for the first episode of Nitro 2 years later, where he was much more comfortable, probably because of the puffy shirt, and eventually made Hogan tap out to win the WCW World title in a memorable match in front of a frenzied crowd a few years after that.
You know, I'll be honest though, you go back and look at that match, he was supremely over in 1997 WCW.
It's those Sears catalog looks, man.
Something about the WCW fan in the Sears catalog look, man, I'm telling you.
Number 6.
Shane Douglas. Let's just forget for a second that Shane Douglas came into WWF from ECW in 1995 with a truly atrocious teacher gimmick. This was peak 1995 WWF, though everyone was saddled with crap gimmicks. That's not too strange.
What was strange was the seemingly immediate heat Shane Douglas had from like everyone in the company upon his arrival. It's as weird as it was intense. Watch any shoot interview from Scott Hall or Kevin Nash, and they have no problem laying it on thick with the ECW original.
Yeah, whether it's Hall talking about how sluggish Shane was in the ring, even though he came to the company with a reputation for being a solid in-ring worker, or Nash recounting how Shane sat a match out with a sore back and raised the ire of everyone in the locker room for doing so, it was obvious Douglas rubbed the wrong people the wrong way back then.
Of course, it didn't help that the Clique basically ran the company in 1995, so we'd imagine that if you didn't kiss their collective metaphorical rings, you'd probably be eating a lot of pins during your time there.
Yeah, but the way the outsiders lay it out, his biggest critic was none other than Yokozuna, who was a big locker room leader at the time. According to one story from Scott Hall, at one point during the European tour that year, during a bus ride, Shane was talking a bit too much about himself, and Yoko just yelled at him to shut the fuck up. Hall then gleefully mentions how Douglas allegedly spent the rest of the time on the tour sitting on the fold-down chair at the front of the bus. That's the least comfortable chair, Larson.
I guess so. I'll be honest though, that just sounds like a shitty work environment.
It does.
Yeah, no wonder Douglas pretty quickly went back to ECW.
Yeah, I would too, I'll be honest. After all that, I wouldn't mind some well-placed chair shots to the head. Maybe a dose of CTE would erase some of those awful memories. Just show up and be like, hey, Taz, Let's erase some of those click memories right here.
Number 5.
Public Enemy. So we talked about the highlight of Public Enemy's short stint in WWE a few weeks back with our Weirdest Shoot Moments episode, but it's time to revisit. The Public Enemy and APA had a match on Sunday Night Heat. Public Enemy didn't want to go through a table for the finish of the match, and APA beat the living hell out of them and then put one of them through a table anyway.
Really, as a tag team that made their careers in both ECW and WCW out of tables, using them, bringing them out to the ring, suddenly have an issue with one table spot. Tell me why, Steve.
Doesn't make any sense.
Regardless, seems like that table spot wasn't the sole reason for their quick departure from WWE. Apparently, there was still some heat on Johnny Grunge and Flyboy Rocco Rock over something that happened back in 1995 when Public Enemy decided to sign with WCW instead of WWE.
But then they ended up signing there anyways.
Yeah, what's the huge deal?
It was 3 years later. Yeah, wrestling was weird, man. I don't know. Anyways, whether it was attitude issues or backstage politics, Public Enemy only lasted 3 months in WWE before heading back to
WCW, of course, where their first match back was the Hardcore Junkyard Invitational. You ever seen that? It was like WCW's attempt at some kind of Mad Max Thunderdome type thing. But then you got Dave Taylor there in a polo shirt and dad jeans. Shirt is tucked in. It kind of takes all the danger out of it.
Again, it's a very WCW thing.
It's prime WCW.
I mean, all the models in Sears catalogs, they all wear tucked in polo shirts. It really does make a lot of sense.
It does, it really does.
Number 4.
Scott Steiner! Okay, Larson, let's do some Steiner math here, considering that in late 2002, the big bad booty daddy had one good foot and a reputation for being a bit of a loose cannon. What were the odds that he'd actually succeed in the WWE?
0!
Correct.
Really though, Freakzilla probably had no business being in a wrestling ring, much less in WWE. Steiner suffered from drop foot, and he said that by the time he signed in 2002, his left foot was basically useless, and that was definitely on full display during his horrid match against Triple H at Royal Rumble 2003.
Kerry Von Erich figured it out without a foot, so why couldn't Scott Steiner? Anyways, even though it just seemed like a matter of time before Steiner was shown the door, yet he still managed to stick around another year and a half before getting his release in 2004.
Steiner eventually got his foot fixed and had himself a decent run in TNA, and now Big Papa Pump is pumping out diner favorites at his restaurant he owns in Georgia. He still wrestles a bit here and there. He had a tag match or two with Jordan Grace at Impact this year, but he seemed to have settled into a decent semi-retirement.
Yeah, unless you put a camera in front of him, as we saw at StarCast. He's like the Wolfman when the full moon is out. He transforms into Freakzilla right before your eyes when that red light goes on.
Yeah.
If I recall, he called Steiner McMahon
Number 3.
Dan Severn. The man with one of the best theme songs of the Attitude Era was also a man before his time.
What, you mean like a time traveler?
No, idiot. Just imagine if Severn was in his prime today. You put him in with Paul Heyman, and bang, you got yourself a massive star, Larson.
Yeah, you got that right. Instead, WWE paired him with Jim Cornette and had him bring his NWA championship with him to make him seem legit. Only problem was at that point, the NWA wasn't what it used to be, so the WWE Universe didn't give a shit about the NWA.
Add to that the fact that back then the UFC wasn't what the UFC is today, and rather than be excited that one of the toughest bastards on earth was getting into a WWE ring, I'm guessing a lot of WWE fans are wondering whose dad snuck into the locker room and decided to cosplay as a wrestler.
Yeah, it probably didn't help that WWE didn't give Severn the respect he deserved to book him well either. Apparently Vince once asked Severn to tattoo 666, the devil, on his forehead for an angle, and Dan was like, F that, how about I win the 1999 Rumble instead? He didn't do that, of course. He just left the company, you know, right after the Rumble.
Was Vince like an early bum fights fan or something? Tattoo 666 on your forehead?
Man.
What a weirdo. Hey, do you remember when I used to put on blue duct tape on my upper lip and do my Dan Severn impression back in college?
I do, and it was the first and hopefully last time I see you in your tidy whities.
Oh, doubtful it's the last time, man.
Yeah.
We're only getting older and crazier.
Number 2.
Vader! It's kind of weird that Vader wasn't huge in WWE. He made the jump from WCW after steamrolling nearly everyone there, except Hogan. And that was after he basically was unstoppable in Japan. Yet after some initial hype for his debut in early 1996, Vader's WWE tenure largely went over like a wet fart.
And you could probably chalk some of that up to a shoulder injury he suffered shortly after his arrival, because that did kill much of his early momentum. But If you want to get into some rumor and innuendo of why Vader's time in WWE was underwhelming, you have to look to the click.
Oh yeah, word is that Shawn Michaels did not appreciate Vader's stiff work in the ring, and depending on who you believe, lobbied to have himself beat Vader and successfully retain his WWE title at SummerSlam 1996 rather than have the Mastodon go over.
And by all means, take all of that with a grain of salt, but apparently Bret Hart didn't care much for working with Vader either, due to his physical style. Also, Bret said Vader stunk.
Oh.
Like vomit.
Oh, why would he say that?
I don't know, it's rude.
It's pretty harsh, Bret.
Oh yeah, Vader, 5 out of 10 in the ring. He was too snug, but he was a 0 out of 10 in terms of smelling great. That's always been one of my strong suits, smelling good.
Vader languished in WWE for a couple more years, and after growing frustrated with his terrible creative, got a release and returned to Japan. He'd make brief returns to WWE every now and then, but for some reason he still is in the WWE Hall of Fame. What's the deal with that?
Yeah, but he is in the Going In Raw Hall of Fame, so there's that. We are pioneers in Hall of Fame.
Number 1!
Dr. Death Steve Williams. If not for some bad booking and a lot of bad luck, one wonders what would have become of Dr. Death in WWE. He signed with the company in mid-1998, apparently with the idea that he'd eventually feud with Stone Cold Steve Austin. But then Brawl for All happened.
Yeah, Dr. Death walked into WWE an absolute beast. He went an entire decade without eating a pin here in North America. He was a massive star in All Japan Pro Wrestling, and he had the reputation for being a legit tough guy. Guess and thinking within WWE was, hey, the shoot fight tournament thing we got will be a cakewalk for a guy named Dr. fucking Death. And they probably thought, boom, main eventer, just be created right then and there.
But here's the thing about shoot tournaments is that they are a shoot.
Oh.
They are for reals. So once Steve Williams stepped in the ring against Bart Gunn, got knocked out and tore his hamstring for reals, any hope WWE had of making Dr. Death a top guy went right to hell.
Williams did eventually return from his injury, and WWE did kind of try to build him back into a potential main eventer, but Williams was let go in April of 1999 so he could continue rehabbing his hamstring.
Dr. Death's career was really never the same though, and he sadly passed away in 2009. Can't really make a joke there though, can you?
No, you wouldn't want to put your foot in your mouth, Steve.
You just did it again!
Oh, damn
you did it again with
God,
the
I'm
Kerry Von
sorry.
Erich
I didn't
thing.
mean to do a joke.
Dang it, man.
Not a joke.
Anyways, there you go. There are the 10 wrestlers we thought should have stayed far away from the WWE. Let us know if you can think of any more in the comments.
I don't kind of want to say anything anymore.
All right, I'll say your line then. Be sure to subscribe, hit all notifications when you hit that notification button, and smash that like button, and do all that stuff too. It's okay, man. You didn't. People know that you got a good heart. You didn't mean all that stuff. You didn't mean to stick your foot in your mouth. Oh God, I just did it! Oh, I gotta stop talking right now. I'm so sorry.